constitutional law class, I want to hire a great lawyer who's practicing law. But most schools in America can't hire a practicing lawyer to do that because they're not certified through the traditional means. Public charter schools are able to do that through alternative certification routes or no certification at all in some cases. So we can have a percentage of our teachers totally uncertified. And so we have the autonomy with talent to pick the people that we most want to have in front of our kids, and quite frankly to let go of those who are not great. And if they're not right for our kids, we let them go. So Democracy Prep is built on these core pillars. We started with one school and one grade of kids in 6th grade. We're now 7 schools and a district of K-12 students serving about 2,000 kids across Harlem. Democracy Prep is now the highest performing charter management organization in the city of New York. And on the Chancellor's Progress Report last year, our school was ranked the #1 middle school in the city of New York with 1,700 public schools. And so that is with students who are 90% low income. And there is a lot of debate about this. That includes 70% who are free lunch, the lowest category. Not just free and reduced lunch, but free lunch. We have more special education students in the district as a whole. That's part of my passion. We have an equal number of English language learners as the district as a whole. We are serving kids, about 15% of whom are in the foster care system or the ACS system, which is the Children's Services System in New York. 5% of our students are homeless. And we are serving them, and yet they are demonstrating, as we tried to do in my classroom, and I was trying to prove this gentleman wrong for the rest of my career, that every single kid who walks in our doors can achieve those results. And that is not only possible at Democracy Prep, but it's possible everywhere. So one of the other things that we've done is said, we're going to do this all on public funds. Because there are a lot of critics of both public charter schools and of Democracy Prep who say you can't do this without lots more money. You can't do this without all these other things. And so what we said from day one is we're going to try to prove this is possible for every kid across America, and certainly every low-income kid in New York who can get into our school. So we have an open enrollment policy. If you live in Central Harlem and you are a 5th grader, you are guaranteed a spot at Democracy Prep now. So anybody who walks in the door over the counter is guaranteed a spot in the 6th grade at Democracy Prep if you live in Harlem. And so we can now say, if you want a great school, move to Central Harlem. That's a crazy concept that I think Thurgood Marshall will be incredibly proud of. Is that we finally can say to that family who lives in Central Harlem, if they want an A-rated school, one of the best middle schools in the city, they need to move to Central Harlem and they will have a guarantee to that spot. It's not based on zip code, it's not based on income, it's not based on test scores, right? It is based on if you live in Harlem, you get to go to a Democracy Prep grade school. And that is a milestone in both the charter movement and I think in education reform that we've been able to offer that for the first time this year by opening our 4th middle school in Central Harlem so that every single student can apply. And we don't get this critique, which is a valid and real critique at many, many charter schools of creaming, where they're going to only serve the best students, or they're going to only serve a couple students, or it's parent motivation, or there's a selection bias. And that is true at many schools. And so what we've tried to do again is prove that's not possible. If every kid can walk in the door, regardless of their background, if they live in Harlem, they can come to our school. And so at the end of the day, Democracy Prep is trying to prove that these things are possible. And there are 2 big barriers to growth. And there's only 2, really. And the 2 big barriers to growth to seeing this happen at every school in Harlem, every school in New York, every school in the country, are talent and policy and politics. Talent and policy and politics. And the first problem is talent. We at Democracy Prep are blessed. We have a good reputation. We have people interested in working for us. We pay about 20% better than the District of New York. So our starting teacher salary for somebody with 2 years is $65,000. Our highest paid teachers go up to $150,000. So we pay well, and people want to work for us. So we had 10,000 applicants last year for about 100 jobs, right? Tremendous demand from the teacher supply curve. There are major problems with that pool, however. We struggled to hire that 100 people, because the caliber of talent that it takes to be in front of our kids is so high, there weren't enough people who met that goal. Furthermore, of that 10,000 people, we're estimating that about 1%, maybe 2%, are men of color. So it is a tiny fraction of people in the pool who are representative of our kids, who we would love to have in front of them, who are even interested in doing this work. And so we have to change the talent pipeline and the talent curve, and one of the things that's happening now is there's a huge bottleneck through our graduate schools of education, where the right people are not getting into education to become teachers, and that bottleneck is stopping lots of people from getting in. So we have to open the floodgates and let lots more people come into the profession of teaching to become great teachers than we are letting now, and open up those gates so we can have better people in the profession. We have to let go of the teachers that are bad, and so Democracy Prep lets go between 10 and 15% of our teachers every year. And that is a conscious decision where we think that we can do better by hiring somebody new for our kids. We're going to do that. And there's not a tenure system, and there's not a lockstep pay system. We treat every teacher individually, and so we can say these are the metrics you're going to be evaluated on. And some of them are test-based, some of them are quantitative. It's actually 60% qualitative metrics, and about 40% data metrics, and there's all sorts of different data that goes into that. And then if you meet our standards, we're going to bring you back and give you a raise. And if you don't meet our standards, we're going to let you go. And that's something that we can do that not every school in America can do, and we're very, very lucky as a charter school to be able to do that. The talent pipeline is something that we have to fix, and there's lots of solutions to that, and I hope we talk about a few of them from a policy side. But the last thing I'll talk about is the policy and the politics. There are lots of politics, and I think Harold is talking about this specifically, that are top-down politics, and I know Leo thinks about it this way as well. And I just don't think those are the solutions that are going to work for kids and families and communities. And what is great about the public charter school movement, it is the exact opposite. It is bottom-up as opposed to top-down. It is saying, in a local community on 133rd Street, we have a local board of trustees, and if you'd like to attend our school, walk in the door and you can attend our school. It is based on our community's specific needs, and if a family is not satisfied with democracy prep, they get to walk out the door and go to either their district school or another charter school or somewhere else. And so we are empowering low-income parents of color, and for the first time really ever in American history, with the ability to choose their school, and to going back to my first point, to give them the choice and voice that for decades and decades they've been lacking in our public school system. And we want to give more of those families the choice and voice that we really believe they deserve, because we think that that is what's going to eventually enliven our democracy, is by producing citizens who are engaged in actually wanting to, as we say in our motto, work hard, go to college, and change the world. And I think that this is possible in every school in America. It is just going to take a lot of work from the people in this room, the people on this panel, and lots more to create the conditions where that is something that we can expect of every school. So it's not just possible, which we've shown it is, but that it's in fact predictable that you can go to a great school with great teachers if you have the tools and the policy conditions in place that are right to let that happen. So I'm looking forward to talking more and hopefully challenging and provoking some controversy and debate on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seth. Leo, Kyle, Lyle,
Okay. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to say from the outset that to talk about education reform, I think it is a duty to say that education reform cannot be done by itself. That we are often fond of pointing out how low America appears on international studies, looking at various countries, and how high a small country like Finland appears. One of the essential differences between the United States of America and Finland is that we have 4 times the rate of children living in poverty. 4 times the rate, the richest country in the world. And if you think that that doesn't have an impact on education, you haven't been in front of a classroom or in a school and seen the rate of transience among young people living in poverty and the way that disrupts education, have seen the extent to which students are absent for asthma, which is epidemic in poor communities. You haven't seen the untreated ear infections, the eye problems that haven't been treated. All of those play an essential role in changing education outcomes in this country. This is not a question of either or. This is a question of what must be done in tandem. And I will point out to you, for those of you who like the world of demography, there's a very interesting parallel that happens in the late 19th century, where suddenly there's an incredible spike in life expectancy. And when sociologists and demographers look at this, they point out that very little of that actually came from improvements in healthcare. What it came from was improvements in sanitation, living condition improvements. And I would suggest to you that it was a very similar set of circumstances, and that for us to completely address the education crisis in the United States, it needs to be done in tandem with the issues of child poverty. And as much as I might disagree with Jeffrey Canada on other issues, I say that he is completely right about the need for community schools that provide the students and their families not only with their education, but with the social services and health services they need to be able to appear in school every day ready to learn. Secondly, I want to say to you that that I think that although the dominant trope of education reform today suggests that there are reformers and supporters of the status quo, I want to suggest to you that actually there are two different models of educational change. There is a model which believes that the market is the answer to every question. We have our Wall Street hedge fund managers, similar people of wealth, who, with regards to education, meet the famous Sarah Palin test of expertise. They can see a school from their house. And the suggestion is that all that you need to do is introduce the wonderful invisible hand of the market, and everything will proceed well from that. In fact, there are two different ways of going about education reform. And one is the notion that competition is the solution to all problems. The other is the notion that collaboration among adults in a school and among different stakeholders in the system is at the essence of what a good education and a good school provides. The second is the notion that you can somehow leverage change from the top, whether it's race to the top, from the U.S. Department of Education, or the ways in which Joel Klein or Michelle Rhee ran their school districts, as opposed to the notion that meaningful, lasting change is something that bubbles up from the bottom. And I'm going to suggest to you that, in fact, if you look closely at this, you will see that teacher unions themselves are in the process of changing from a system that was a dominant system in the United States well until the end of the 20th century, one in which schools were organized along the lines of a factory, one in which the systems of education were assembly line systems. And when teacher unions first came into not existence, because we existed from the beginning of the 20th century, but into a situation where we were actually engaged in collective bargaining, we took as a model industrial union contracts. The auto workers, which was the great progressive union, was our model. And in those contracts, we tried to regulate the action of management to prevent abuse of power. And so if you looked at the contracts which developed in the early days, you will see a system of regulation designed to prevent authority from becoming abusive and to ensure a basic level of fairness. We are engaged now, I think, in a transition to a post-industrial professional unionism. And at the center of that is trading systems of regulation for teacher voice in all of the important decisions in schools and in education. And I sent in 3 different agreements, which I thought, you know, a group of lawyers, you'd love to see contracts. I sent in 3 agreements. I don't know if you all got them, but if you didn't, you can just email me and I will send them to you, because I think they are illustrative of this change. The first is a contract between the UFT and Green Dot, New York, a high school charter school in the Bronx, which is graduating its first, South Bronx to be precise, which is graduating its first class this year and has 100% graduation rate. And in this collective bargaining agreement, you will see that there is